So yeah, this is part of Catch's live masterclass series, where we bring in amazing experts and swimmers to cover topics that I feel are massive game changers for swimming. At Catch, we're really passionate about making it easier for people to transform their swimming so that they can take on really amazing swim adventures and challenges that they might not have thought possible. So this is very much in line with what we love to think about all day long. For anyone who doesn't know, Catch is a swim coach. We're an app. We combine personalized training plans, video technique lessons, one-to-one coaching with me, and a really supportive, friendly community, all designed to just fit around real life, which is the classic juggling act that I'm sure you all know about: swimming, the demands of life, how to balance it all. We feel we've created something that kind of helps people do that. So on to tonight's topic. Big swim goals can feel very exciting and quite scary and, quite frankly, ridiculous. Often all of those things at once. You might be here because you're thinking about your first 5K, or you might be thinking about some crazy long ultra open water swim. Whatever it is, you're so welcome here. And what we're going to be talking about really is around the decision making, around how to pick a goal that feels right for you. So this is all about helping you figure out whether a goal is a healthy stretch or a bit of a step too far right now. And what we hope to do is, for any of those things that you're pondering but haven't yet committed to, it will help you move from a feeling of self-doubt to a clear, confident decision. So yeah, we want you to leave feeling excited about what's possible for you in 2026 and beyond. Many of us obviously are thinking about things well into the future. So on that note, I'm so delighted to introduce tonight's guest expert, Adele Benson. You might know Adele as Swimming Adele on Instagram, TikTok, etc. Adele is an ultramarathon open water swimmer. She's an English Channel soloist. So if anyone's got English Channel on their bucket list, she is a great person for you to pick the brain of. She's also a Catch ambassador, so she's a member of our team. She's taken on swims that are far bigger than she once thought possible, and she brings such valuable, like, real world insight into what it actually takes to decide if you're ready for a major challenge. And she's got such a cracking sense of humor as well, so this should be really fun. She's going to share some practical tools, some honest reflections and guidance to help you assess your readiness, build belief in your ability, and make smart decisions about your next big swim. So over to you, Adele.
Hello. I hope you can all see that. Let me know if not. Scream or something, that might be useful.
Adele, looks beautiful.
Amazing. So hello everyone. It is wonderful to see you all, albeit virtually, this evening. And thank you for joining us as I talk your ears off all about how to decide if you are ready for a major swim challenge. Ultimately, I would love for you all to come away today booking your own major swim challenges, or maybe giving another one a go that you thought impossible. I'm a really big advocate for people being ambitious with their goals, and firmly believe that with the right prepper mindset, most people could do most swims. Before we do get stuck in, I will reiterate that some of the examples I use are maybe more on the extreme end of swimming challenges, which, as you'll soon see, is how I've been able to then speak to knowing whether or not you're ready, because I've had to sort of navigate some of that. So for those of you who aren't as familiar with me, yes, my name is Adele. I'm an ultramarathon swimmer. I swam the English Channel in 2024 and have completed a number of other long distance swims like Windermere. Last year I did a 2-way Coniston. I've done a couple of overnight 1 mile on the hour challenges. I did Lake Annecy, and in this September I'll be swimming the Bristol Channel. So I learned to swim as a kid, but never took it particularly seriously. So I came to swimming in my adult life to process difficulties I was facing, and sort of as an outlet to improve my mental health, before finding out about open water swimming and swim challenges that existed. And so I began to challenge myself more, and ultimately haven't really stopped. I'm also regularly terrified in the water, which will be a little bit of a theme. This photo is of me just before my English Channel swim, where I was very intimidated by the challenge ahead of me. I didn't expect this photo to be taken, but for those of you who don't know, with the English Channel, you're sort of taken on your boat to the shore, you're put in a dinghy, carted off to the beach, expected to jump out, get off at the end, put your arms up in the air, and then the swim starts and you're off. So it was all very fast, and as you can see, I was quite overwhelmed in the situation. But one thing I do want to say about my English Channel swim is that I did make my booking very naively. So I ended up swimming it on June the 11th in 2024. So in June, the water is still really cold. And I was actually the first woman to cross with the Channel Swimming Association in 2024. So when I made the booking, I thought it would be balmy. I thought, June, what, must have picked an excellent slot here. No, that was not the case. But don't get me wrong, though, I still did so much preparation. So I may have been naive when I booked the swim, but I was supported by some amazing people who helped make it happen and who showered me with wisdom and advice. So one of which being Ben Taylor here on the far left, who was also an English Channel soloist, but he gave me so much really great wisdom and information. So now, the reason I wanted to start this journey of wanting to better understand whether or not I was ready for the next step actually came after my English Channel swim, where I was approached by a friend who runs a charity and was asked to swim around the Isle of Wight for them. For those of you who aren't as familiar with the Isle of Wight, it's an island off the south coast of England, and to circumnavigate it is over 3 times the length of the English Channel, 97 kilometres minimum. And unlike other circumnavigation swims, so like some people do go and swim in Jersey and the Channel Islands, this swim is not tidally assisted. Only 6 or 7 people have ever done it. And the fastest time recorded is by Alison Streeter in, I think it was 1984, who did it in about 21 hours. In their defence, this friend isn't familiar with the swimming world and so didn't quite understand the undertaking they were looking to sign me up for. But I wanted to give the swim some serious thought. There are, as you may know, there are some magnificent swimmers out there doing like Lake Geneva at 70 kilometres and even distances much longer. And I was honoured that somebody thought I could be amongst that, but I also like to think I don't have the ego that means that I would just instantly sign up for it. So I did want to share some tools and thought processes that I learned along the way that helped me decide whether or not to do that swim. So as Rebecca mentioned, today we'll be covering, how to tell the difference between a healthy challenge and a step too far, looking at some practical tools to assess your current skills and experience, how to grow your confidence in open water for this year, and moving from a maybe to a confident, informed decision. So, how to know you're ready for a major swim challenge? You don't. All right, great presentation, everyone. Good night. I'm kidding, obviously, but there is a huge element of truth to this, the sort of myth of being ready for something. For some swims like the English Channel, where you sometimes are booking years in advance, you can't wait until you think you're ready and just go. And it's the process of the training and preparation that does make you ready on the day. So, we often forget in open water swimming as well that what we do is an extreme sport. It's incredibly dangerous, and there are many factors outside of our control that influence how you do want to swim. So swim pilots on boats can predict and navigate these to an extent. And in fact, the year I swam the English Channel, I knew and had trained with so many amazing swimmers who, they were incredible, arguably much better than me in their speed and experience. But that day, the temperature, the tides, how they were feeling did not align, and so they didn't get across. And often in life we look for that certainty. I mean, that's it's why horoscopes are so popular, right? We want to do everything we can to control the controllables. So to give you more of that certainty, there are a few tools and tricks you can use. So first of all, looking at your physical evidence. So with your dream challenge in mind, you first need to consider the physical evidence you have. What distances, for example, have you already swum? So if you've only swum 2 kilometers before, it might be a bit of time before you can swim the English Channel. But doing a 5-kilometer swim would definitely be achievable in the short term, for example. The same goes for times you want to hit. Sometimes swim events have time cutoffs, or you want to achieve a certain target time. For a swim, looking at what you've already done is a really great starting point. How consistent you are with your swimming, how often have you done certain distances? Generally, the more you swim, the more possibility you have to go further. And recovery after hard swims. The first time I swam Coniston, I couldn't put my arms above my head and my energy was wiped out. I'd planned to go and walk up the Old Man of Coniston the next day, and I just stayed in bed watching Netflix. And that's actually really important information to have, because the next, not the Netflix bit, but the next year after I swam Ullswater, I was fine the next day, which let me know that my body was adjusting and getting used to having an increased distance and volume of swimming, which means I knew it was time to increase my swimming and swim further. Then we've got skills evidence. So when you're thinking of your dream swim, what are the conditions you'll be facing? Are they the same conditions you swim in regularly? Or maybe you do all your training in the pool and so need to practice swimming in the conditions you'd face in your dream swim. The Catch app does cater for this, as you can toggle your training sessions to be in the pool or various outdoor swim venue options and tailor your swim session to that venue, which is a really cool tool. But knowing for your dream swim what navigation is needed, for example, you know, if you're swimming next to a boat, have you done that before? Have you practiced? Do you have a feeding strategy? And how locked in is it? How are you with pacing when it comes to event? And how do you exit the water? So that's a lot to consider, but you've always got time to learn. And ultimately, a lot of it is about knowing what works best for you in the water, which you determine from experience and testing. Then we've got psychological evidence. How do you respond when things get tough? Do you have to get out of the water when you see a jellyfish? Do you mentally struggle to swim for more than 30 minutes? Making a list can help with this, of past moments you didn't quit. So when I swam Ullswater back in 2022, I had these really fancy goggles where it was all changeable. You could, you know, the lenses, the nose bridge. Honestly, it was, you know, just, it was very fancy. They were a very lovely gift. And I'd used them a number of times in training where they had been fine. But during this swim, they kept falling apart. They were letting water in and I had to rest on my toe float for ages, or what felt like ages, trying to fix them. And I thought to myself, why bother? But I managed to get them together and I kept going. And also your ability to stay calm when plans change. So a lot of these psychological evidence checks come from your other evidence checks. So thinking, what physical evidence or skills do I need to feel like I can do this swim? And am I able to make those happen before the swim comes around? Which leads me on to logistics and life. So these can be more relevant for the extreme end of swims. But for example, can you afford the swim? Often it's not just the swim, but the accommodation, kit, food, travel, insurance, medicals, and it can all add up. Can you fit the volume of training in? So if you need to commit to 2 or 3 swims a week, is that feasible for your life? And is the swim you're imagining possible? So there are still swims out there that have not been done before. Is there a skipper who knows the area well enough to pilot the swim? And is it safe? Now, going through all of these evidence checks, it is a lot to consider, but you will know which gaps are bigger for you, and that's not bad. That doesn't mean you'll fail. It's information, because you then know what you might need to know, develop or line up in that process. So for me and for the Isle of Wight swim, this was the biggest area to evidence check. So for me, I started to look into the logistics. This is such a rare swim. How much would it truly cost? Not just for the swim itself and the fact that I'd need a number of support boats. But the real kicker was when I mapped out what the volume of what my training might look like in the run up to a swim that long. And even at conservative estimates, I figured I would need to quit my full-time job in order to complete the training needed and to make sure my friends and family still just about love me. And ultimately, that helped me decide that it's a no. Well, it's not necessarily a no, it's a not for now. So all the evidence checks I've taken you through do require you to be pretty self-aware. If you are uncertain about any of the answers to these, then I would thoroughly encourage you to speak to a trusted friend, somebody who knows you and knows swimming. So, for example, if you regularly downplay your achievements, they will hopefully make you see sense and encourage you to go for that swim you've always wanted. Or they might help you remember that things were pretty tough on some of your longer swims. So maybe the swim that's 5 times longer than you've ever swum before maybe isn't the best decision for you. So, healthy challenge versus too far into the deep end. It is your call. You'll know where your levels of comfort are and what you're willing to sacrifice for a big challenge. But this might be a helpful way of thinking about it. So a stretch versus snap. So a stretch goal is something that, you know, is good, setting yourself a challenge that feels scary, but something you could expand to, building logically from your current experience and as a pathway to get you to your goal in a manageable way. However, a snap goal, on the other hand, relies on hope, not necessarily the preparation needed to achieve the swim you'd want. It skips key steps of your journey, which could mean you enter the water unprepared and ultimately hate the whole experience, and has no margin for error. And ultimately, all swims need margin for error as the conditions are completely out of your hands. And ultimately, we do swim for fun. We're here because it's something we find enjoyable and like to challenge ourselves with. So picking a challenge that works for you as much as you work for it is important. And also, when thinking of your dream swim, answer some of these questions to give yourself some reassurance. So it's very much like an imposter syndrome final boss, really, some of these questions. I went through this thought process when I considered signing up for the English Channel, knowing that I would be booking the swim 2 years in advance. And I mentioned I was naive when I booked the swim, but I made sure to learn quickly about the conditions I'd be heading into and the ways in which I'd need to develop my swimming. So I was able to speak to others around me who knew the English Channel and about how this swim would be harder and what I should expect. The 3 ways I predominantly wanted to prepare in answer to the third question were getting some sea swimming experience, especially next to a boat in choppy conditions, losing the wetsuit, as before that I had swum almost exclusively in a wetsuit, and night swimming experience because I hadn't had a huge amount of that by that point. And you absolutely can be confident in open water. And even when you are a confident swimmer, you won't always feel confident. So being confident is a skill. You practice and build by being familiar with the uncomfortable moments in swims. So some practical tactics to help you be more confident. So chunking swims into manageable sections. As I just mentioned, knowing which sections or elements of a swim you need to practice, whether that's night swimming, wildlife exposure. For me, I was desperate to see jellyfish and touch jellyfish beforehand. That did not go well either, but sea swimming for maybe choppier conditions if that's what you need more experience in. And this works for distances too, the chunking into manageable sections. So about a month before my English Channel swim, I had this massive pang of anxiety and was convinced I couldn't do the swim. I was crying because I was worried I'd led on all these people into thinking I could do it. And I was so convinced it wasn't happening. Instead of continuing down the negative thought spiral, I decided to look for evidence instead that I could do it, prove myself wrong, So the next weekend, I swam the distance of the English Channel over 3 days. I thought, if I can do this, then I know physically I can do the distance of the channel. And so I did this weekend of swimming, and you know what? My shoulders felt great after it. I still had plenty of energy. My fueling strategy was in a great place, and I then knew that I would be able to do it. Next, so you can create anchors you can come back to. So these can be songs, mantras, an activity to do in your head. So for me, this is to look for post boxes. Hear me out. Based on evidence from Emma France, who runs Dover Channel Training, who is also a hypnotherapist, she said to me to not think about the jellyfish and look for post boxes, because if you saw one of those, you knew you were hallucinating, and that's when you're really in trouble, not when jellyfish are around. Which helped me incredibly, because I am rather scared of jellyfish, even just the sight of them. But some other people have mantras. So if anyone listens to the Open Water Swimmers podcast, they'll know that William Ellis has "the water wants you," as in like it wants you to be there, not it wants to kill you. And staying, staying when comfort disappears. There was a swim I did in 2021, which was a 3-kilometer sea swim, and it was choppier than people thought it would be. And I couldn't be bothered. I just couldn't be bothered at the time. And then at that point, I had used this zip-up swimming costume, and it hadn't done this in any of my training, but it kept unzipping as I was doing this swim, and it kept throwing me off. But each kilometer you swam, you went past the beach again, so it was sort of a loop. And each time I wanted to get out, and I was convincing myself I wasn't good enough to continue because I was feeling discomfort. But discomfort doesn't go away as you go for bigger challenges. You just get better at dealing with it. And I did complete the swim. And I also later on stopped wearing zip-up swimming costumes. And finally here, reframing bad swims as data. In 2023, I entered a swim I had done before by You Swim Adventure, which is swimming 12 miles, 1 mile on the hour overnight. And I had done it in a wetsuit the year before, but this year was focused on acclimatization and getting that preparation for leading into the English Channel. So starting off, I didn't feel great, but kept going regardless. And about 4 hours in, it was dark and I was struggling with an incoming migraine, triggered by bright lights in the area. And when I was coming into the shore from the mile I was just finishing, somebody shone a bright light from the shore, and the pain in my head got so bad that I almost threw up just from seeing this light as I was sighting. So I abandoned that swim as painkillers were not doing their jobs. But what I did learn from that swim is that I could be sensitive to lights in night swims. So when I have a light on the back of me, which you are required to do for some swims, especially at night, I kept it a constant light rather than a flashing light where possible. And if the boats I'm being piloted by can go with fewer lights, I tend to take that option. And so that swim became data, not a verdict that I'm a bad swimmer, which was a really great reframing for me at the time because I was rather disappointed. Now, when doubt will show up ultimately. Doubt is normal. It does not disqualify you from doing something. Most doubt is actually a fear of embarrassment, a fear of failure, or even a fear of being seen trying. So we need to reframe it so you know what to do when you've booked your dream swim challenge and your doubt shows up. And ultimately, doubt is a symptom of caring. You are doing something that is meaningful to you, and you should see it as a sign you're growing. So a question that has helped me in the past is this fear protecting me or limiting me? If you're worried about starting something, then it sounds like your doubt is limiting you. And sometimes people name their doubt. I've heard of people who are close to me naming their doubt Gary or Brian or Steve. It means that the doubt doesn't feel as overwhelming when it does come, because it's not necessarily, you don't feel like it's from yourself. You see it as another being. but it's maybe just Gary, Brian, or Steve with some imposter syndrome. Also, a reminder, you've always got options and you've always got an element of control in what you're doing. You've got, for example, right now, 3 valid next steps. And all of these are very strong decisions based upon your own contexts. So you can go for it. There's adjusting the challenge to make it more feasible in the short term, or there's building more evidence first. And ultimately, pausing is not quitting. You don't need to be the bravest swimmer, just an honest one. All right. And my advice always is do it scared. As I've mentioned, I'm often terrified when it comes to swim events. I get anxious about how cold it would be. I doubt I can go the distance. I get worried about my feeding strategy. And I'm incredibly scared of what else is in the water with me and will jump at the sight of a jellyfish, even if it doesn't sting. But I do not let that stop me getting in and swimming on. And I don't know about you, but I often find athletes, particularly in open water swimming, at like the very top of the sport, portrayed as like godlike creatures who have no fears, no injuries, no niggles, no other pressures in life. They just get in, swim, and finish in great times and get out as though it's nothing. And that's because they've created that persona in the media, but it's human to have those things and perfectly fine to have doubts. And so now when I look at this picture, I definitely still see myself terrified, but I also see myself at my strongest, my most resilient, my most defiant, because I still went in and kept going and now get to deliver presentations to you amazing people about why you should do the same. Thank you. That's everything from my presentation. I'm really hoping you come away and have enjoyed it.
That's amazing, Adele. Thank you so much. There's lots of clapping hands and hearts filling the screen. So yeah, that was absolutely amazing. There's so many good things in there. I think you just made that whole decision-making process feel so much less mysterious. And I love the idea of building those different evidence banks. That's what it's all about, isn't it? It's just like breaking it down into those different categories and building that evidence as you go. And there was lots of great stuff in there as well about like being kind to yourself and being patient and like walking that tightrope that, like, as human beings, we love our lives to feel like it's punctuated by stuff that challenged us and that felt quite hard. But those are often the times you look back and they're like the most memorable things, the things you're most proud of. So I loved that final photo and what you said about like how it's completely reframed it in your mind as to like what that represents. Then I think all of us can relate to that in various different ways, right? Even if it's not the English Channel, like we all know that doing these really, really hard things that scare us often end up being the highlights of our lives. But yeah, there is a delicate line to walk, and you made those great points about things like, you know, are you really ready for the training side, and are you ready for the costs, the various different costs that are involved? So we'll dig more into that now with the Q&A. So yeah, we'll kick off with Sally's question. So Sally asked about training, and this really good question that I get a lot, which is like, do you have to swim the full distance of your big swim, your next big event, before you do that event? I can do a little spoiler here as a swimming coach, which is you don't, like, not even close, actually. This is often a big misconception of big swims, that you need to have done these like insane volumes all in one go. And actually, kind of to Adele's point about building that evidence of that is training, right? And what's actually an incredibly valuable thing is thinking about sort of nudging up your weekly distances and various different aspects of your volume over a period of time, rather than getting in those like, you know, like those really, really chunky swims. So just as a bit of a reference point on catch, depending on the length that someone's training for, the length of their goal. We often won't set someone a session that is longer than, certainly not longer than 75% of their race distance. If we're talking a channel distance swim, just to give you a reference point, if you're swimming 50% of the distance, that's still a 16-kilometer swim. That is huge. Likewise, 65% of that overall distance, that's 21 and a bit kilometers of swimming. So these are enormous swims, and you don't necessarily need to do them. So yeah, there's that point that Adele said about like chunking it up into steps, and a coach and a good training plan will help you do that. Adele, curious to hear, like, for your channel swim training, do you remember what your longest swim was in hours or distance?
The only thing I was actually scheduled to do was like an 8-hour swim, was probably the longest. The only reason I did that sort of weekend volume swim of like breaking up the English Channel for the distance was actually mentally for me to have that reassurance, so I could get in the water and be like, I know I can get to the end. It isn't required physically at all. I think some people say like it's 20% physical and 80% mental when you do these swims, because you just have to keep on going.
Yeah, absolutely. The mental fortitude side, that cannot be understated. Great. So we've got a question here from Jemima saying, if you were to swim the English Channel again solo, would you do anything differently?
Yes, but I think some of it is more to do I don't think there's anything I'd change in my training. I think what I would do is make sure my partner is better prepared, because I had my partner, Josh, on the boat with me. There were certain elements that we hadn't gone through and practiced that maybe we could have done better of. So, for example, using a mix of Vaseline and Sudocrem to, protect myself from grazing on my shoulders and underarms and around my neck. We missed a slither under my right arm. And as I swam, it grazed because you're moving your arm, you're doing so many rotations. So actually I ended up like with almost like a cut. It's like almost carpet burn just under my arm. So that was incredibly uncomfortable. And also at one point I said to him, oh, can I have a Vimto feed, please? Which is just carb powder and Vimto and hot water. And he just added it to my normal feed, which was of this, like, it's called Active Root, but it's like a sort of sports drink of electrolytes, and it's sort of and carbs, and it's like peppermint and ginger flavor, because the ginger was to settle my stomach. And so we added it to that and it was disgusting. So we ended up having an argument whilst I was in the water. So probably, don't get me wrong, we're obviously very happy now, we're getting married in June, but certainly there were certain things there that I think we could have run through a bit better in advance, but ultimately it wasn't swim ending as such.
Yeah, great point, right? It's not all on you, it's your support crew, and they need to feel like they understand what your expectations are and what your needs are. So you almost can't go far enough with, training your support crew as well as yourself and your own body. There's a great question here from Rachel. And so as someone who is starting to think about big swims, I'd love to know a little bit more about your progression from non-swimmer to bigger swims. What did you do in between? So yeah, are there any things along your journey that you didn't share with us earlier that's important to note from, when you first started to be like, I'm ready to give swimming another crack?
Yeah, because I think ultimately it was a lot more gradual than it might look, because I'm here coming to you as a channel swimmer, but in reality in 2018 I did my first open water swim. It was the Henley Classic, like a downstream river swim that was early in the morning, but I think it was only a mile, 2 miles or so of swimming. And I say only at the time, like right now, that's the context and perspective I'm working in. Whereas, at the time that was like a mammoth swim for me. And, I was so incredibly proud of myself. And, now, and I still am proud of that swim. And I actually then didn't swim again until after COVID, like properly doing outdoor swimming, because I needed something after the pandemic to really focus myself. And so I was, at the time, I mean, it's just unfortunate because I wish Catch had been there at the time, because at the time I was using books from like Ross Edgley, because that was the only source of like swimming knowledge I had. So I was doing like the training plans from that. and yeah, just not knowing anything. So I think having a resource like Catch is incredible. But yeah, otherwise it was a gradual progression. It was, you know, every year I did a couple of swims and built up gradually until I was like, oh, I'm not really stopping now. I should probably, like, do I go all in on swimming, or do I maybe try and do something more economical? And I went for swimming, obviously.
Yeah, and we're grateful for it. I couldn't agree more with the gradual build up. I think that's a great way to do it. Great question here from Claire about fundraising. So a lot of big swims are paired with fundraising, and that can come with its own stresses. So Claire said, I think one of the things I'm most scared of is the fundraising, given she's doing her swim for charity. Adele will definitely have thoughts on this, right? Because Adele's raised money for charity through swimming, but has also worked in the charity sector. A quick thought from my observations of swimmers doing charity fundraising swims is it's really wonderful if you can offer people something. There's this amazing person called Amanda who does quite a lot of fundraising for Level Water, who are a charity who do these amazing river swims that many of you are familiar with. And Amanda, this is quite extreme, but Amanda raised thousands of pounds last year for Level Water, and she built her own swimsuits and sold them, or like auctioned them off. So there are some quite creative things, you know, and that could be from a bake sale, you know, sending things to your friends. But I think there's something you can do that's sort of a bit creative that offers people something, whether that's, yeah, like, you know, baking them cakes, or whether it's like designing your own t-shirts and then handing them out. And I think, you know, like asking people for money is absolutely fine. It's an amazing cause. Doing a big swim is like, you know, it's worth celebrating that, and your friends and family want to support you. But if you feel like you want to take it a step further, there are some sort of really cool things you can do if you sort of think outside the box as to what can you use to sort of tempt people, and host an event, get them to come and swim with you. You know, just little things like that I think people really enjoy. How about you, Adele? Any hacks for fundraising?
Yes, I'm thinking back to my English Channel swim, which was my first sort of bigger fundraiser, which I got £3,000 for Maggie's cancer care up in Manchester. And at the time, I think the biggest success was actually using networks and asking friends to share it as well as donate. Because if people can't donate much, that's, you know, that's fine. But also, you know, hey, do you mind giving it a quick share? Because people are more likely to support if it's somebody they know that has asked them. So that was really successful. And, you know, work, I think particularly were quite good with this actually, but also things like, you know, are there any platforms you can do blogs for to talk about your experience? My Bristol Channel swim is actually for an organisation called Toucan Diversity, and I'm going to be doing like a swimathon at my pool that I go and train at, and at the same time going to be doing, I want to say, a bake sale. I don't think I'm that good at baking, but I will see what I can do just to try and, you know, raise a bit of cash for them. But yes, I really loved what you were saying there, Becca, about, you know, just lots of different creative options. Blind auctions, brands love to help, and if there are brands you are working with or that you love, maybe asking them for a donation of a product to be able to put towards some sort of blind auction or a raffle is also a really good idea.
Yeah, definitely shout about it. Like, shout about it more than you think you need to, right? Just raising awareness, that's what can really help boost the funds. Great tips, Adele. So we've kind of tackled in the chat the bilateral breathing question, which is, do you have to be a bilateral breather, which means do you breathe on both sides? And Adele's pointed out she swam the channel and only breathes on one side. So yeah, it's absolutely fine. There are some small benefits in open water swimming to breathing on both sides, and there's a bit more balance that you can get in your body. Yeah, you can get some asymmetries if you only breathe on one side, but you know, at the end of the day, like, do what's comfortable for you. It's not at all compulsory to breathe on both sides. Parker asked, is it worth booking in a 5K open water a month before my first 10K to get more comfortable? Yes, but book it earlier than that, I would say. Like, I would say doing 50% of the distance is a perfect training swim. You're doing it outdoors. perfect idea, but maybe even try and book it in 2 months to 6 weeks in advance. I think that would be a brilliant idea. Anything to add to that, Adele?
In terms of, yes, I think ultimately yes, because if that gives you the reassurance you need, then absolutely. But I would agree with what you said there, Bex, as well, just making sure that you've got, because if that's, I don't know what your open water swimming experience is, but certainly making sure you've had those opportunities. Because I certainly find on swims where I have to sight loads, I actually end up hurting my neck quite a bit if I don't practice that skill often. So little things like that, and understanding then how your body works and what you need to do to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff. We'll just whiz through a couple more questions here. Adele, did you ever suffer from seasickness during your training for your English Channel solo? And was there anything that helped you manage it?
Yes, and I was going to say drugs, but that's probably not the thing to start shouting on a group call. But yes, I use, I mean, some people recommend scopoderm patches, but they can be quite expensive. I can't pronounce the tablets I use, but I'll find them and I'll send them to you to share out with everyone, Becca, because yeah, I end up having to use seasickness tablets quite a bit. And as I mentioned, I found active root, which has ginger in it, and that helped settle my stomach as well. But again, it's trial and error. I went to like understand what works best for me when working with seasickness. I did a swim camp at Bournemouth, and so I was swimming in the sea every day for about 5 days, and each day I was able to test something different and see what worked best for me. And ultimately it's a tablet with one of my feeds every 6 hours. Obviously make sure to test it, because also things like scopoderm patches, usually people recommend only doing a half, and even then you can end up with like it causing negative side effects. So understanding what works best for you in your context.
Brilliant. Yeah. And actually, funny enough, one thing that sometimes triggers nausea or dizziness with outdoor swimming is actually the ears. It's cold water getting into the ears can cause your balance to be off, and that can show up as nausea or dizziness. So it's also worth, if that's a challenge for you, pop in some earplugs and really pull your hat, maybe even double hat down over your ears, and you might find that helps. One final question, because we are so close to being on time. Jemima has also asked about sports nutrition products, which is a great question. Gels, carb powders, etc. What helped you decide which ones to try? And there's a very interesting point here about powders that I don't know if I can pronounce this, but I'm going to try, which is, what are your thoughts on maltodextrin powders versus cyclic dextrin? Adele?
Yeah, really well there on pronunciation. I use both maltodextrin, so I use that on my English Channel swim, and more recently I've started using like cyclic dextrin, simply because I found it much easier on my stomach, which, you know, because I've had a hiatus hernia, which has come up since I swam the English Channel. So my context is now very different, and I've had to relearn how to feed whilst being more sensitive to things like citrus and acid and stuff like that. So it's ultimately finding what works best for you and testing it. Recognize though that that's incredibly difficult, because it all costs so much money, and it feels like such an investment to then be like, oh, I've got to buy this big bag of sports drink mix, and then finding it doesn't work for you. So I'd highly recommend going to friends and be like, can I just have like a little sandwich bag of this product to try out for a swim? Most of the time it will be a yes. I have found products that I didn't like after a while, and then given them out to friends to be like, see if this works for you, because it hasn't worked at all for me. And using some of your own experience too, because those carb powders can be good, making sure you've got like a treat there along the way. Yes, somebody's just put in the chat, some companies do sample packs. Absolutely, that is definitely the case. You can also build your own drinks, which are also much cheaper. But yes, it's ultimately all trial and error and seeing what works best for you, what's also going to keep you going for a long enough swim. So for me, I mentioned a Vimto feed. I love Vimto. I'm drinking it right now. And when I'm ill, I'll heat it up. So when I'm swimming, I really like to have that familiar taste that I really enjoy, and being able to come back to it on a regular basis is quite nice. Some people also do things like having a few chocolate buttons, or other treats. Some people also highly recommend things like peach slices when you get them in a can, because they are really easy to take down. They've got lots of sugar in from syrup usually. So those can also be quite good if you cut them up, and then you can essentially sort of swig them back and go off on your swim as well.
Great tips. Yeah, I use X Miles for these sort of trialing different samples. So yeah, X Miles is a really good one for just building a box of loads of different ones you can try. At the end of the day, like, it's just about getting carbs in, and you just need to set yourself a bit of a goal of like, it's good to set yourself a goal of like, I'm going to get in 60 grams of carbs per hour, something along those lines. Like Adele, you would have had like a whole fueling strategy, which will have been quite complex. But yeah, I totally agree with so much of what Adele said there. Actually, Catherine, to your point, feeds, if you're type 2 diabetic, we're talking sugar, carbs. It's a bit of a complex one for people who have type 2 diabetes. So yeah, I would say that's definitely worth building with a nutritionist. And if anyone's interested in nutrition advice, like a proper nutrition expert, we are going to be doing a session on that. Plus I can link you up in the meantime. So Catherine, I think a top tier nutritionist would be the person who's best advised to help you on that. Great. Well, we are up to time. Brilliant questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for getting so involved. And Adele, can't thank you enough for being so generous with your time tonight. I think everyone's had an absolute ball talking about big swims. It can be pretty niche, can't it? So it's really nice to bring together 30 plus people talking about this on a Monday night. Well, we'll let you go off and enjoy your evenings and your dinners. But thank you so much for joining us. We're going to send you heaps of bits to get stuck into after this. If you've got questions, Adele flashed up our contact details earlier. I'll share those again in my follow-up email. But yeah, thank you so much again, everyone. It's been so nice hosting you, Adele. Thank you, and hosting you all tonight.